Welcome to the June 8th episode of Reactive Consciousness, our in-depth podcast about what happened this week in pop culture. I am your host, Lotus Prince, and this is...
PyroJackFrost yet again.
And OldManStompy. Vice did not miraculously return between Corrective Consciousness and Reactive this week.
No, I don't know how that happened. Oh well, guess the world will never know. Ever.
One of life's mysteries.
Yep. So... what was it that you'd wanted to talk about? Because I believe there were a few things that were quite exciting.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take it over because I've been gone for 2 weeks. So, the first thing I wanted to talk about is something I talked about on Corrective Consciousness. I wanted to talk more about Persona 5 now that I've beaten it. I don't plan on spoiling anything because I know if it took me this long to beat it, there are still people who are playing it. The first thing I want to say is the game was still good all the way through. There were parts that it did drag on near the end. So last night when I was beating the game, I thought I was like almost done, and then there was like another dungeon afterwards, like not a full dungeon but another dungeon. I'm like, are you serious? Like, just get on with it already. And then I got to the boss, which also took long because it's the final boss, and then there was all this dialogue because it's an RPG, so they need to have all this closing dialogue. But it's so there were lots of time skips, but it's just it felt like it ended longer than it needed to. It went on for longer than it needed to. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, it was fun. And I don't want to spoil anything, but the way that you beat the final boss is pretty cool.
Nice.
That really means nothing.
Yeah.
But
so, I do recall that you were sort of texting us, because we usually record the podcast one day prior to when we're recording it now, at like 9:30, saying that you were like desperately trying to rush through the finale of the game to sort of put it to rest. And it seemed like, well, like I was trying to figure it out. I was talking with my wife. I was like, is he trying to beat it before 10 o'clock so that he can go on the podcast, or is he? That's like, what I was. Just
I thought that's how far it was. I thought that's how much I had left. I thought I was just this little bit of dungeon left, final boss done.
Mm. Yeah,
but then there was another dungeon and all this other stuff.
Yeah, so and then at like 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was, you texted the Corrective Consciousness group saying that you had finally beaten the game, and by that point I think like Vice was asleep, and I should have been asleep.
Yeah.
And I should have been asleep. I got way too little sleep last night, and I barely was able to function at all today.
Yeah, but I guess that was worth it, right? Like,
yeah, no, it was worth it, and I really want to start a second playthrough now too, because you carry a lot of stuff over. Mm-hmm. So you carry all the money you held on to, all of the equipment you ended the game with. So I'm super powerful. Nice. You don't keep your level, but you keep all your social stats, like meaning that your knowledge, your charm, kindness, that sort of stuff. You don't keep your confidant rankings, but since I was able to date a girl in the game, she gives you a present on Valentine's Day or Christmas. On Christmas, that lets you rank up faster in the next playthrough. So, the other thing is, like I said on Corrective Consciousness, I already got most of the trophies, so I technically don't need to do any of the confidants. But if I want to, I can do it a lot quicker. The other cool thing that they did, I don't know if they did this in the other games, because in Persona 5, all of the confidants, which are like the S-Links, have abilities they give you, not at every level, but they give you some abilities. Like one character gives you more experience in battle, and also gives more experience to your non-party members, like people that aren't in your direct party, to the point where at max rank, all your characters gain the same amount of experience.
Oh, nice.
So it makes leveling up your people you don't use that often very easy. If you get a confidant to rank 10 and talk to them at the end of the game, they give you an item that basically, once you start their confidant at rank 1, they give you like their best, a lot of times their best skill.
Oh, sweet.
So technically I don't need to rank up most people, but there's a lot of things that are going to make the second playthrough a lot easier. But I kind of have to do a New Game Plus to do 2 of the trophies anyway. So if I could have, I would have gotten all the trophies before beating the game. But there's one persona you can only get in the New Game Plus, which is basically the persona you unlock at the final boss. And then there's a secret boss like most Persona games, and most actual Mega 10 games have, that I need to beat, which you can only do a New Game Plus. So those 2 trophies, along with getting every single Persona like that, those are the 3 trophies I need before getting the Platinum.
Okay, that's pretty common too for Mega 10 games, right? Where the optional boss is only available on the second playthrough, so you have to go through the game a whole other time.
Yeah. And I don't know when this one unlocks, but I don't even need to beat the game a second time to get the Platinum. I probably need to get to near the end of the game, but not that far.
Have you done the optional bosses in like Persona 3 and 4, and like how difficult do you expect the Persona 5 one to be?
So in 3, I don't recall if I did, because there weren't trophies for me to remember if I did or not. In Golden, Persona 4 Golden, I got the Platinum, so yes, I did beat the boss. But I think it was not purely me doing it myself, because like most secret bosses, there's not like one strategy you need to follow, but it is difficult, and there's lots of either really cheap moves they have, or time limits in terms of you have 5 rounds to do this much damage, or she's just going to instant kill you.
Wow.
So I don't know if I'm going to try to beat this one through my own merit, or say screw it, I just want to beat them and get the Platinum Trophy. But I do plan on trying to beat them at least.
Okay.
There's another thing I wanted to mention, if I remember correctly, but like I think I'm surprised the aesthetics held up for so long. I mean, there's a lot of not skippable things, such as the end battle, like when you're getting your experience in gold, can get kind of long, especially when you're grinding. But everything kind of kept up throughout the whole game. Nothing got boring. Nothing got annoying. There were still menu things that were going on that I found out near the end of the game, or that I noticed and it was still interesting at the end of the game, which is really cool. And there's so many things in that game that are completely unnecessary that they do just to keep the theme and style going, which is really cool. I wish I had an example off the top of my head, but I can't think of one right now.
Just the whole game, top to bottom, more or less?
Yeah, mostly the whole game, top to bottom, was just that had lots going to it in terms of the looks and the feel of the game.
Okay, so I guess we recommend this to all of our listeners, although I would imagine a lot of them who are interested are already playing it, since it's like one of the top games for the PS4 right now.
Yeah, another cool thing that happens at the end. So throughout the game, there's this little bar on the bottom right that's like your basically during the beginning of the game you meet a character who helps with your online presence. He has a website dedicated to the Phantom Thieves, and he poses questions to the public, and based on the rating, like you can see what they think about all of you, and it's honestly purely a story thing. But there are times like when you increase your confidant rankings, or go to the extra dungeon and do stuff there, it'll slowly build up. There are times in the game where it goes up a lot or goes down a lot just because of story segments, but it's like a really little thing that you're not even thinking about. You're like, oh, that's cool. But at the end of the game, like it actually plays a really big part in the game, which I thought was amazing. Like you're only able to beat the final boss because of it. Like that's the whole part, and it's like really cool.
I like stuff like that. I mean, it makes me. I mean, I mention this every once in a while on the podcast because I'm playing it at the time, but it reminds me of Yakuza, where some side characters, I mean, they're not going to help you beat the final boss, but some side quests or like sub-story missions just end up having more of an arc than you thought they would, and they can greatly like increase your stats or whatever, and you kind of get more familiar with those characters than you thought you would, and they're like almost entirely optional.
Yeah, and another thing that I do recommend this game. I mean, I would obviously recommend it because of the fact that I am a huge Persona and Mega 10 fan, but it's not perfect. There were a lot of story parts that I thought were kind of cliche, or twists just so there's twists, and usual maybe JRPG fashion, the final boss kind of has nothing to do, not nothing to do, but it's like has everything to do with what's been going on in the game, but is completely not someone or something that you expected or saw until the very end of the game. Not as bad as like 9, I think. Wasn't 9 the one where the final boss was just completely out of left field?
You mean Final Fantasy 9?
Final Fantasy 9. Sorry, yes, Final Fantasy 9.
Yes, like the second to last boss concludes like the entire character arc of the game, the main protagonist and like his arch nemesis, and then all of a sudden you fight like the personification of death, and you've never seen or heard anything about it.
Yeah,
prior to that point.
That is a little disappointing. Like, you finally beat your rival or whatever, but wait, I was working for this guy the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, what?
So, Persona games, at least 3 and 4, have done that in the sense of, so for instance, in 3, like, I'll spoil these because they've been out for so long. In 3, you are trying to find out what this, like, you can, all the party members can see what's called the dark hour, which is the 13th hour, actually the 25th hour of the day. It occurs between 12 o'clock and 12 o'clock at night. It's like the midnight hour. And there's this weird tower that is in place of the school, and you're trying to explore it and see what's going on. And there's 3 other Persona users you encounter that aren't part of your team. They're actually like the villains, which is kind of cool. That saying that not everyone who uses Personas is a good guy.
Right.
When you eventually get to the top of the tower, you beat them, and throughout the game, you notice that people are getting more and more depressed. I guess not your party members, but just like random common folk are getting depressed, and you don't know why it is. And at the end, you find out that it's just this personification of death who is causing everything, and you have to defeat her. And it's like I haven't even heard of this character until the very end of the game. I mean,
Yeah.
like everything up to the point made sense. It's not like it was just out of left field in that sense, but you didn't. It's like everyone who you were trying to fight, you beat, and it's like there's this other person, just like how
it doesn't feel earned.
in 4, you're trying to find out who's killing, who's trying to kill all these people, who's throwing them into the TV, and you find out who it is, and you defeat him. And you realize he's also a Persona user, just, I guess, in normal fashion now. And you defeat him, and then you find out that the person who gave you and him your powers is the actual final boss. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever. And this game kind of does a similar thing. So it's not like I was upset about it because I kind of expected it. But it is still kind of like there was no way that you would have known that something like this would happen. Which is...
I would say that like if you believe that the Persona games tend to have significant attention to detail, then like in the case of Persona 3, you would notice that these people have this like apathy syndrome. You know, that you'd expect there to be some overarching plot that resolves that, and it turns out there is. You're dealing with like the personification of mankind's yearning for death, and that's like the final boss of the series. And in the case of Persona 4, like it really closes it, sort of like there's a lot of clues the game gives you. You know, the true final boss is like the third in a string of what you think the final boss is going to be, and at any point in that string, at like if you make the wrong choices, one of those 3 can be the final boss, right? Like the game can end after the first one and then the second one, and then it turns out that like the real boss is like someone posing as a gas station attendant, which is the first NPC that you meet in the entire game, and looks sort of suspiciously like the protagonist in like a weird way, and is like surprisingly detailed for a unique sprite that doesn't have a portrait. The reason she doesn't have a portrait is because she looks like the main character, and like if you, and she's there, like she shows up all the time over the course of the main game, but only when it's raining. And like if you start like thinking about this, you think there's something up with this character. You never find out what it is, even if you've done all the character side quests. And so it pays off at the end when it turns out that she was the one behind everything all along, and she was acting as sort of a silent observer until the plot was ready to resolve itself. So, like, if something's like that in Persona 5, I'd be curious how it sort of builds.
So I'm going to try to say as little as possible, but it's like the final boss that you eventually think you're going to, and like where you have connection to, because all the other bosses kind of led up to this point in a way. But there's always this other idea. So there's an extra dungeon called the Mementos, which is just kind of like this game's random dungeon, which is supposed to be the palace, which is what we call dungeon in this game, of the society's desires. So each of the bosses has what's called a palace, which is basically how they view their surroundings, because their desires are so great that they have done that. So like the first boss, he sees the school as his castle, that he's the ruler of this castle. So when you go into his palace, you see it as a castle, and all the enemies are knights. And all the bosses have something like that. Whereas the Mementos is just society's palace. It's the yearnings of all the desires of all the society. And you wonder what's up with this dungeon. And if you're actually going through it, you can't get to the end of it until after the end of the game. And that you can't even get into the end. Like after every boss, you unlock another level of it. But when you beat the final boss, you realize that you didn't unlock another level. So you're like, there has to be more to this. And so they do kind of build to that, where if you listen to the people, if you actually pay attention to what people are saying, you do realize that society is kind of the villain in a way. So it is cool that they did that. I do see what you're saying, that there are like probably little things, and I'm going to be skipping a lot of dialogue the second playthrough, but I'm going to kind of also try to see if I can notice more of these things. Mm-hmm. It's actually, it's kind of cool because the final boss makes sense, and I've heard from another podcast I listened to that a lot of the themes of this game are less of like what you might directly think, but more along the lines of the divide between the old and the young in Japan right now. Like a lot of the old people prefer that they're just told what to do and they'll do it, and they don't have to think much for themselves. Where the old people or the young people want to like be their own people, which is kind of the whole idea in this game of rebelling, being the thieves. So there is like that common theme that goes, and that's really cool.
So to draw kind of an analogy, you talked during CoreCon about Virtue's Last Reward, right? And that game has a twist about one of the characters, especially at the very end. That like you'd think that it's so out of left field that you think that it would have been noticed at some point during the game. You know what I'm talking about, right? I don't want to spoil it. Yep. You know, but like if you play the game a second time, or if you just spoil it for yourself and play the game knowing that, it's interesting how much the game sort of pokes you in that direction, and how far they go out of their way to make sure that it's logical that you wouldn't know that surprisingly obvious fact about this one particular character until the very, very end of the game.
Well, Danganronpa did a pretty good job with that too. Not that it was an obvious fact, but Danganronpa like had clues the whole time, but like what was great about them was that you didn't know that they were clues.
Yeah, that's definitely in there. Like you're talking about the first character who dies, basically, right? Or one of the first character who dies.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. There were things regarding like appearances. There were things regarding if you had engaged with a certain character's, like friendship building things, like certain items that person likes could clue you in. What Monokuma said about like just before the first person died was a surprisingly subtle hint. Even outside the context of the game, you'd have to have outside knowledge to get it, but it's possible, stuff like that.
But yeah, I will say that twist in Virtue's Last Reward was a surprise, because I don't think this will be a spoiler, but when you first encounter Fi, was that her name?
Yeah,
yeah. And she jumped out of the cell, and then later on you find out that there's that one ending you can get where you find out you have a robot arm. Yeah. I for a long time just thought that she had robot legs, and that was just why you two are special. Like, you have robot arms, she has robot legs, and that's why she could jump so high. And then the whole twist at the end, like, I did not see that coming, but now it all makes sense.
Right. It's like, so the two main characters in the game are called Phi and Sigma, so you can almost be led to believe that they're like characters off an assembly line, because they have like these really, really like bizarre Greek letter names when everybody else has something resembling well, except for the guy in his suit, but everybody else has pretty normal names.
Yeah, and like, so like that, I will say, like I said in CoreCon, like a lot of the plot twists I thought were really cool, and a lot of the plot points were really cool. But yeah, so Persona 5 was fun. Second playthrough is definitely happening. There's not a lot more I have to do, but I am enjoying it, and it's funny because I actually wanted to jump right in and play it again. It's like I had that feeling that I usually get when I beat a game, like that I want there to be more. Like I had this when I beat Horizon Zero Dawn. I'm like, oh, it's over.
Nice.
But I was happy because in Persona 5 I have a reason to keep playing it.
I feel that way with Phoenix Wright games when they come out, because they don't come out very often and they tend to go real fast. So like when I get to the end, it's like, when is the next one coming out?
Yeah. So that's all. I mean, I don't know if either of you had any other questions about it.
No, I mean, I guess I have one. It's regarding basic, like really basic plot mechanics. Like you said that each dungeon or palace is a reflection of someone's desire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you go in there, do you fight the actual person, or are you like in their head, or what?
So I guess this isn't really spoilers. The general idea is you are in what's called the metaverse, which is this game's version of the collective unconscious, which is a general theme in the Persona games, which is basically how all of humans' thoughts and minds connect.
Mm-hmm.
And they have their own palace, and the version of them you find is how they view themselves. Okay. So, like I said, the first villain sees himself as a king, and when you fight him, they all have their own boss versions. So like he doesn't look like himself. Like he looks like himself until you fight him, and then he turns into this other, more grotesque-looking version that shows all his desires.
Sure.
But the whole point is, once you beat him, the general idea of the game is if you kill someone's unconscious self, they basically die in real life.
Oh,
it's
okay.
More that
that was actually kind of what I was wondering. It's like what happens when you beat a boss, because I was wondering if it was going to be like Psychonauts. Like, have you played Psychonauts?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, for those who don't know, with Psychonauts, you kind of have the power to sort of go into people's brains and just see all their like weird thoughts and stuff like that, and they usually have some really negative thought kind of nagging away at the back of their head. Like one person's really like afraid of criticism, and like the
one's afraid of milkmen.
Oh God! Like the criticism, the criticism one was just like a theater critic who's just being an asshole. But if you kill the theater critic, then you kind of like restore confidence to that person. So like if you beat the boss in their dungeon, which is their brain, you kind of like kill their bad thoughts and allow them to grow as a person. So I was wondering if it was like that in Persona 5, but apparently not.
Well, it's kind of. So the idea is that if you kill them in the game, which you don't, you just defeat their boss version, they would die, they'd go crazy or whatever. But the general idea is when you beat a boss, they go back to their shadow self, and you don't kill them, and you tell them that you want them to tell them everything they've done that's wrong. You're basically trying to reform these criminals. And then the whole point of it is you're thieves, so you steal their treasure, which is what they desire the most. And by doing that, you basically steal everything that they ever wanted to achieve. And since they have nothing to live for, you could say, they, in the real world, will admit every wrongdoing they've done. So that's like the whole idea is you're reforming these criminals.
I mean, I guess so, but the way you phrase that makes you sound like the ultimate asshole in this game. Like
so that part of the game, too, is the characters keep questioning if what they're doing is right.
Oh, okay.
But in the end, you don't actually kill these people. They still live just regretting everything they've done. But then, like, one of the villains is actually killing people for his own gain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like trying to it helps your character separate from what you're doing from what the villain's doing. Is you're actually not killing people, you're just helping them. You're trying to make them better people, I guess you could say.
I mean, like I haven't played the game, but just based on what you've said, it sounds like you're the lesser of two evils.
In a way, yes.
It sounds somewhat Inception-ish, right? Like you're trying to change someone's behavior on a fundamental level, not necessarily like kill them or reduce their reason for living to nothing.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. And it also goes by the whole idea that you're all thieves in this game. Like all the characters are some sort of rebellious thief. So thieves aren't usually good guys.
Yeah, that's true.
In a sense, and that's part of that as well. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention really quickly, I know that in a previous recon, Vice talked about Falcom games, and I know that I also am really into Falcom games. I've played most of the Ys games, as well as Xanadu Next, I think it's called. I played that in Japanese in college.
Nice.
the game, a new a new Falcom game is coming out soon. It was announced at least that they're releasing in English, and it's Zwei II.
Yes, I think it's a remake of Zwei II, I believe.
Okay, so let's get all the jokes out first.
Yeah. So if you get
is German for two.
Yeah. So the joke. So like the remake of Zwei II, you could argue is Zwei II 2. So if I were to get both games, I would have Zwei II 2.
And
Yes.
so, just as an aside, I looked at the box of of Zwei 1, and it's actually Zwei with 2 exclamation points after it. So it's like Zwei with like exclamation point. It looks like Zwei 2.
Nice. That's ridiculous.
Even though it's Zwei 1.
I'm pretty sure it's Falcom just making jokes about it too.
I'm sure it's intentional. Yeah.
Because if you're unaware, from what I recall at least, Zwei 2, it's called Zwei because you play as 2 characters that you can change between. That's the idea of why it's called Zwei. So the funny thing is, I played Zwei 2 in college when I was playing all these other Falcom games in Japanese that I had no idea what was going on because I don't speak Japanese. So I didn't actually get far in it because, like, there's a lot of puzzles I think there were, or just a lot of dialogue that if you don't understand what it's saying, you don't know where to go. So I kind of fell off it. So I'm actually kind of glad it's coming out now because it's another Falcom game that I can beat. Another one that I beat, so when I went to Japan whenever I graduated from college, I
like
played
2008,
Gurumin.
I guess.
Yeah, I played Gurumin, which was another Falcom game that was released at that time, was newly released in English. So I'm glad that all these Falcom games are coming out in English because they're pretty fun, and I really like action RPGs, and most of them are action RPGs. So this is another one I can add to my list of games to play.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think about Zwei 2 Plus? Did you play this isn't really a new game, right? It's not even the remake is not super new. It's just the first time it's been made available in English to North American customers.
Yes. So I didn't read much about it, but it seems like it's definitely an improvement. Not only is it in English, which is an improvement for us English-speaking folk, but also that the gameplay is an improvement. I didn't find there to be much wrong with the game from what I recall, from when I played it in 10 years ago, but I read, there are a lot of gameplay improvements that'll make it a lot easier to play, and not as, because I will say that back in the days there were a lot of annoying mechanics that were in games just for the fact that was what everyone was doing. So they seem to be making it a little bit more accessible, which is nice.
Okay. I mean, I kind of do want to play it. Like, I realize that I always used to style myself as an RPG fan, but, like, the games that I actually played were, like, I've really fallen out of the genre lately. Like, I even though I still feel like I play RPGs all the time, I realize that, I've never beaten Final Fantasy 11, 13, 14, or 15, only 12 in the last...
Well, you can't really beat 11. 11's also an MMO.
Well, yeah, but there's a storyline you can play to the end of it, just like you can in 14. I wouldn't say that
True.
you would beat it, but you can play it. I've actually heard it's pretty easy to do that now. Now that all the content is out, there's no reason to get people to play the game for like years at a time, so it's actually pretty easy to grind to the max level. But yeah, like I find that my favorite like period of RPGs tends to be like PS1 to PS3 era.
Yeah,
like, and there's not a lot left. Yeah,
a lot of people like that era.
Mm-hmm. And there's like not a lot left because that was around the time that all the obscure Japanese games actually started coming out and being brought over to America by other publishers. So like for some of the last stragglers to be coming over for us to enjoy, I really look forward to that.
Yeah, I really look forward to it because I have always been an RPG person, but as my time to play games gets less and less and less, I tend to try to play more action RPGs. So,
right.
And Falcom games are great for that because they're not usually that long, but they have enough meat to them that they're not going to be done with them in like 6 to 10 hours, and you're like, all right, cool, next game. Like they can still last up to 20 hours, and they are usually the gameplay is very interesting, or there's something to it that it's not just mashing on X or whatever to beat the game. It's kind of funny because I beat Persona 5, and I'm like, I know I want to play Final Fantasy 14, but there's also so many other games that I want to play. Like Final Fantasy 12 The remake is coming out soon.
The Zodiac one, yeah.
And I want to play that because I heard the Zodiac job system now is really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Like a huge improvement over the original, which I beat several years ago. I still need to beat the Final Fantasy X HD remake, which I talked about like months ago on the podcast, and I just stopped playing it because of Persona 5. The Kingdom Hearts 1.5, 2.5, Super Ultimate Uber Edition, whatever they call it now, that was out on PS4.
Kingdom Hearts is Vi.5 and Vi.8.
I want to play those, so there's way too many games, and RPGs take so freaking long. I don't have the time for this anymore.
Yeah, are you kidding me? I had a whole rant like several podcast episodes ago about how I finally finished Trails of Cold Steel 1, and that only means that now I'm allowed to play Trails of Cold Steel 2, but I also have to finish Trails in the Sky 2nd chapter, and now Trails in the Sky 3rd chapter is out, and all these are like 60-hour RPGs at a minimum if you rush through them, so it's like, you know what? They can keep those games. I will buy them. I'll do my best.
Yeah.
I'll support the company, but I make no promises as to whether or not I get to the end.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar feeling because like I got a bunch of RPGs when I got the chance, and I still haven't played them. Like I think I've even mentioned this before. Like it took me forever to finally play Valkyria Chronicles for the PS3 because it always takes me forever to get to starting any RPG because it's always intimidating. Like I know this is going to take forever. And, I beat Valkyria Chronicles, and, like, several years ago, I beat Resonance of Fate. That was another one where it's like, oh, man, am I going to play this? But, now there's, I want to play the new Nier game, but because I'm compulsive, I want to play Drakengard 1 and 2, Nier, Drakengard 3, Nier Automata. I want to play. I still haven't played Ni no Kuni. There's the entire Deception series. It's like God damn, like it just never ends.
And like for Ni no Kuni, you bought the Wizard's book, so like you really should now that you're like priced into it, really should actually play the game.
Yes.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to mention was that what was it? Oh, so Valkyrie Chronicles. I played Valkyria Chronicles 1. I haven't played 2 or 3, but I don't know, Lotus. I don't know if you know this, but they announced a new Valkyria game. That's supposed to be more of an action RPG.
It plays very differently.
Yeah.
From what I've heard, 2 is kind of mediocre. 3, I hear, has a better story, but it wasn't released in the States because the PSP was already not doing well here. So, like, I think I might have mentioned this in the podcast before. Like, it just pisses me off. But, like, Udon was cool enough to translate the art book for all 3 games. So we have this English art book for Valkyria Chronicles 3, and we don't actually have Valkyria Chronicles 3. That said, there is a fan translation project that has completed translation of the main game, although last I checked, I think they were still working on the DLC. So I guess there's at least hope for that. But then there's that new Valkyria game, which I want to say comes out in July. It was either June or July, but we'll see.
Yeah, it is coming out pretty soon.
Yeah.
And about, actually, that's a decent segue into something else about some new games that are being announced.
Oh, yeah.
This is actually, OldManStompy, you might know more about than I do.
I wouldn't say I know a lot about it, just that I was the one who suggested it as a topic for today. That apparently tomorrow, Nintendo has announced that they are hosting a press conference to announce, a new Pokemon game, I guess for the Switch tomorrow in a Nintendo Direct. Well, it's tomorrow by the time that we're recording this podcast, but it will be in the past by the time that our loyal listeners pay attention to us.
Whoa!
So I guess you can judge our predictions as to what it might be against what actually happened.
I mean, I can see it being a new game because the Switch is being
It's kind of a Pokemon Snap. Come on.
So I read this on the internet, so take it with a grain of salt because I didn't actually fact check it. But Nintendo has yet to hold a Pokemon Nintendo Direct. So Nintendo Direct, for those not familiar, I don't know if they hold these or make them available outside of North America, but they're like these little like streaming YouTube things that Nintendo does where they announce like their upcoming products, and they're a pretty big deal by Nintendo standards. They supersede sometimes even like their E3 conferences in terms of announcing new games and content. So for Pokemon specifically, they've never held a Nintendo Direct except to announce a major game. Like the last time they had a Pokemon Direct, it was Sun and Moon, and the time before that, it was X and Y. They did not even hold a Pokemon Direct for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. So if they're, and again, like I heard this on the internet, so take it with a grain of salt because I didn't actually check to see if there was a Nintendo Direct for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. There are like generic Nintendo Directs, so I'm sure it was shown on a Nintendo Direct. before it was announced. But so if they're hosting a Pokemon Nintendo Direct and it's supposed to be for the Switch, then there's a high probability that it is the next mainline Pokemon game or a sequel to Sun and Moon for the Switch, which is extremely exciting because we have never had a mainline Pokemon game on a console that can be played on a television without a lot of work or an extra peripheral. So that's pretty exciting. And
yeah, and like I said, I could see this being the case because the Switch is being seen as a portable system, although it's not like the best portable system, I would say, because it is still kind of big, but
and the battery life is worse than the original generation 3DS. So
yeah, but it is cool to see that they're doing that, because I think 3DS, whether or not they say it, I can see it's dying. There are fewer and fewer games being announced for it. I'm hoping that the Switch becomes a better portable system, whether the second version has a better battery life or something along those lines. But I mean, I love Pokemon, the idea of it, but I just never play the games because I don't want to be compelled to collect every single Pokemon. It just I don't have the time. If I don't have the time to play all these other RPGs I want to play, I'm not going to collect all 5,000 Pokemon that exist now.
Yeah, so it took me about 80 hours to finish the Pokédex that was only applicable for Sun and Moon. So it was a selection of 301 of the 801 available Pokemon right now.
Yeah.
And the rest is bookkeeping, because you can't catch them in the game. You have to find them in the earlier games and then just transport them to your current game. So it's more like having that index already on your previous game than just spending like 10 hours transferring your file over to Sun and Moon. It's not really interesting or compelling in any way. I did it originally for Diamond and Pearl. Like I got everything I could in Diamond and Pearl, and then I spent all my time using the GBA slot on the DS to transfer all my old Ruby and Sapphire Pokemon over, and it took like hours and hours and hours, and I didn't really feel like I accomplished anything. So.
It's like when I played, because I think the last Pokemon game I played was X or Y. I forget which one. Which one was the blue one?
Pokemon Blue.
X was the blue one.
Okay. So I played X because a lot of reasons why. One is I had time to play it, and I had an opening in my slots of games to play that I could pick it up. Also, I think it's because I picked up a 3DS and I picked that up with it, and I heard that it was back like a return to form from the original ones, which is the only other ones I've really played. So I beat the game, and I think when I went into it, I was thinking of collecting all the Pokemon. Like as I was going through areas, I was trying to capture as many Pokemon as I could. But then I got farther and farther, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to beat the game first, and then I'll go back and collect them. And then I beat the game, beat Elite Four, etc., and I'm like, I'm done. Yep, this is it. I have a cool party, and that's all I really want. So.
Or you could just take the same tactic as Lotus Prince and say that there are only 151 Pokemon and everything else is garbage. is DeviantArt original characters and not worth collect.
No, I mean it was enough of a pain in the ass to get the original 151 because this was before the Wi-Fi, so you really had to just borrow somebody's cartridge or
I'm lucky I had a brother who played.
Yeah, same with me actually. So I got the 151. And then it's not even like, oh, the new Pokemon are stupid. It was just like, now there's 100 more Pokemon. And I'm like, no, you're not fooling me. Like, I'm done.
It's like, I know where this goes.
Yeah, pass. All that shit I did, do it again, including the Wi-Fi less trading, only this time with Gold and Silver. I'm like, no, we're done.
To be fair,
that's true. That's
Sun
true.
And
Moon,
Moon,
the older ones were a lot more annoying to collect all of them because they didn't have the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Sun and Moon, I think, might be the most friendly for people who want to catch the entire Pokédex because it's the first game that gives you multiple copies of the version-exclusive legendaries.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, one of them is kind of a pain to get. You have to jump through some hoops and do a little bit of a side quest. But the other ones, they just give you... there are just multiples of them running around, and you can catch them all and use them as trade fodder to fill in your Pokédex from the other version.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I am kind of curious about this.
Yeah. So if it is in fact Pokemon Stars or Pokemon Sun 2 and Moon 2 or some completely other esoteric 8th generation of Pokemon games, then we can plant our flag and say that we called it here first.
Yes.
And by first I mean that I read it on Reddit and everybody else predicted the same thing. But hopefully you heard it here first, and by first here I mean like 3 days after the actual.
Yeah, this is gonna like potentially be the most like faulty topical podcast yet, where like everyone's hearing it for the first time after the announcements actually happened. Like, well, they were just instantly, oh, they were wrong about this, they were right about that. Like,
well, the only solution is for us to record 2 nights a week, and that's not happening.
yeah, no.
I mean, when Pyro finally goes crazy, we can just record his rantings, in an empty padded cell. We can put them up on YouTube, and maybe some of them will be accurate, some of them will predict the future.
I didn't get all that. Could you rave one more time?
Funny story. There was actually a guy on a bus that I was sitting next to the other day who was just ranting about like who knows what, and it was kind of scary, kind of silly. I was actually listening to music, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to turn this off so I can hear what he's talking about. He had some really interesting pop culture references in his ranting.
Huh.
There's one time too where he just like screamed. He said, "I'm not political," but he just screamed at the top of his lungs. The lady in front of him jumped because it completely startled her. It was the weirdest thing.
So it's just dead silence, and they're like, "I'm not political."
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like,
who are you talking to?
If you weren't hearing everything he was talking about, you could for a second think that he was actually on the phone with someone.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
But he was just talking to himself the whole time. It was, and I've seen some really weird things on the subway and bus in New York City. This guy was very, very interesting.
So, on the topic of strange and uncomfortable things, let's talk about wrestling for a while.
These segues are killer.
Yeah.
They are. Have you ever run someone over in one? Like, I personally have not. Those of you who have listened to Corrective Consciousness know that I've never killed anybody.
This is our connection to Corrective Consciousness.
Yeah. Whoa, we did it.
Nice. So anyway, usually in keeping in our theme of being up to date with our reactions, usually I don't come on to talk about the previous week's pay-per-view until the week after it actually aired, meaning that you don't hear my reactions to it until about 10 or 11 days after the pay-per-view itself. But because of Pyro taking Sunday off to finish Persona 5, I watched the pay-per-view. I usually also don't go on the podcast that week because I want to watch instead of talking with you guys. As much as I love you all,
guys don't watch
we know what your priorities are.
Yeah.
So I actually got to watch parts of Extreme Rules, and now we can talk about it a little bit. And I should say this time it'll be like 4 to 5 days late instead of 10 to 11 days late. Like
Yes.
You're getting better.
A little better, but this is a one-time only deal. We won't be so fortunate in the future.
Our only choice will be to live stream it.
So I talked before about how I prefer the blue brand SmackDown to the red brand Raw. I think it's better written. The storylines are more coherent. The builds are a little bit better, and it's less like suffocated by all the corporate interests and all the corporate partnerships that the WWF has. We had really, as fans, been looking forward to the next pay-per-view after the one yesterday. The next pay-per-view is called Money in the Bank, which is exclusive to SmackDown, and it might actually be like one of the greatest ideas that the WWF has had in a really long time, because it's something you can only do in wrestling, you cannot do in real sports. The idea behind Money in the Bank is you have this match where you have like 6 mid to upper card guys who are all like close to the main event, and they compete in a ladder match for a briefcase that contains a contract. And the contract says if the current champion is in the ring and a referee is present, no matter what his current state is, if he's passed out, if he's dead, you can cash in that contract for a title shot right that exact second. And so it tends to be like a heel thing. Like
yeah.
Well, yeah, because you have to be pretty dishonorable to do a dick move like that.
And but it also tends to indicate who they have tapped as the next big up-and-comer for the main event. So it's always very exciting when they hold a Money in the Bank event. So I'll talk more about that when we actually run it, but that's the next SmackDown pay-per-view. And, this last week's pay-per-view was a Raw pay-per-view. It's called Extreme Rules. It's like the exact opposite of that. It's like this totally dead, heatless event. So the idea behind Extreme Rules is that they usually load up the card with like gimmick matches where you're allowed to use weapons or where there's no disqualification. And in principle, that should make for like a kind of an exciting, like sensationalist, like Z movie style show where people are just beating the crap out of each other with whatever they have available under the ring. There's always all kinds of interesting things under the ring. You know, if I don't know who put them there, but that's like one of the great mysteries of wrestling. Is like why there's like ladders and kendo sticks and like chainsaws and all this crap under the ring. Like, how did that even get there? Who in the WWF prop department thought this would be a useful thing to have under the ring for a sanctioned wrestling match?
Well, that's like in the Yakuza Coliseum fights. Like, sometimes they're like, this is going to be a weapons match. And there's all sorts of, like, there's, like, baseball bats, there's, like, a table, like there's just, like, insane stuff that you can just pick up.
Yeah, but,
like
that's descended from professional wrestling, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a big professional wrestling following in Japan. And, of course, we know now that the New Japan guys are in Yakuza 6, so they're directly just showing up in the game now.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah, I think I've shown you the video of this before. They're a rival gang in Yakuza 6.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fantastic.
So the problem with these scheduled pay-per-views that are built around extreme matches is that usually an extreme match works best when it's a payoff and when the gimmick plays into the storyline that's being approached in the feud. So, like, the quintessential example is the steel cage. Steel cage is one of the most famous and oldest gimmick matches in wrestling. The point of a steel cage is usually that, like, the heel is trying to escape, you know, a face-to-face conflict with the face. So you put them in a steel cage, and then the heel can't run away. And then the next level up from steel cage is called Hell in a Cell, which is, you know, a steel cage can be climbed out of. It's usually just walls, but the Hell in a Cell is like this giant thing that's just like a box that they drop over the ring, and nobody's getting in, nobody's getting out, you know, for the rest of the match. And that's like the ultimate steel cage match. So usually that's where, like, the biggest grudge matches in wrestling history get settled. The first Hell in a Cell match was one of the only 5-star matches WWF has ever had. Like,
Damn.
that was how intense the feud was. It was the debut of Kane. He, like, tore the door off the cell to get at the Undertaker.
Oh my god.
And that was like his big signature moment, establishing him as a monster. So now Hell in a Cell is like the main event of a pay-per-view. They build a whole event around it. So you always know, like, no matter how much heat there is in a feud, no matter how intense it is, they're still going to wind up blowing it off in the cell, even if it doesn't deserve it. And it kind of cheapens the cell a little bit. It kind of makes it hard to always structure a match and have it look different every year and distinct, to have this match that's supposed to be this, like, big event, and to have it once or twice a year. I think last year in the cell they had 3 matches in the cell, so, like, that automatically makes each one of them less special, because there are only so many ways you can use, like, a steel cage as a weapon, or, you know, as a prop in a match. So these 6 wrestlers are all competing with the agents for what spots they want to do and to get into their matches, right? So it makes the pay-per-view kind of a cluster. So Extreme Rules kind of has the same problem. And this year it was especially bad and, like, especially confusing. The main event was fine. The main event was a 5-way match, just a total clusterfuck for the #1 contendership. So the title holder right now on Raw is Brock Lesnar, and he only wrestles like 4 times a year, so he almost never shows up in pay-per-views. So the main event of Extreme Rules was to decide who the #1 contender would be, and they actually invented a new pay-per-view called WWE Great Balls of Fire.
Huh. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like, people weren't really focused on Extreme Rules. They were focusing on making fun of the pay-per-view called Great Balls of Fire. Like, the first logo was like 2 balls of fire with a streak behind it that looked like a penis.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. It was like, what?
So it's like they didn't really think this all the way through, as they were sort of shooting from the hip and trying to establish this new pay-per-view for Lesnar to defend the title at. So for a variety of reasons, people weren't really paying that much attention to Extreme Rules and weren't really looking forward to it. And it seemed like WWE Creative sort of took the piss and took the night off as well. So, for example, the opening match was for the Intercontinental title, and the stipulation was that so usually in the WWF, you can only lose a title by pinfall or by submission. But in this opening match, they added a stipulation that the champion can lose the title if he gets disqualified. So that meant that you had this opening bout to an Extreme Rules pay-per-view where the opening match had no extreme stipulation whatsoever, and in fact, the face was going out of his way to avoid doing things that might get him disqualified. And on top of that, the guy he was fighting, his wife was his valet. So the first question is, why doesn't she just, like, knock her husband in the face or give him a low blow right when the match starts, because that would cause her husband to win by disqualification, and then he would just leave with the title. And it would actually be a pretty good heel move for him to do that. Like, that's sort of, it's not a commonly used tactic, but it is one of like the lesser known tactics in the heel playbook to screw with the face and to get the face disqualified. Like, there's a famous, I don't want to say he's a heel because he was beloved for his antics, but this guy Eddie Guerrero, who used to do a move where he knew that hitting someone with a chair got you disqualified. So he would hit himself with a chair, and then he would throw it as he was passing out to the other guy. So when the referee turned around and saw it,
That's
looked
so
like
corny.
the other guy. I mean, I wouldn't say that he hit himself with a chair, but he would just throw the chair to the other guy, and then ragdoll on the floor until when the referee came into the ring.
That's such
so
a
like
dick
you
move.
can have some fun with it, but like so usually the opening match in WWE Pay-Per-View is designed to get the crowd in its feet. But this was like the blue balliest match I've seen in a really long time in the WWF. Like, the whole idea was to avoid using these extreme stipulations in the opening match. I just don't understand what the point of that was, and they never really used the wife. She actually got kicked out pretty early on. So she wasn't even really a factor in the match. I guess sometimes it feels like they think that something is so obvious that they just don't want to do it, and they do everything in their power to avoid doing it and like to stay away from it. So maybe that was the idea. Otherwise, so the Hardy Boys, you know, the Broken Matt and Broken Jeff, those guys who I've from the Final Deletion, they've come back to WWF. They are currently the tag team titles. They won it at WrestleMania when they returned. And again, people have been looking ahead of this match. They're waiting. They just keep asking, like, when are the broken characters going to debut on WWF television? And are they going to do that? And are those characters intellectual property of the people who own the promotion that they used to wrestle for before they came to WWF? And is it even possible for them to bring those characters to WWF television? They're not, like, appreciating any of the matches that the Hardy Boys are wrestling. They're just waiting for these broken characters to debut. So, like, it feels like nobody really cares about their matches. So to get some excitement on this match, they made it a steel cage match, which is nice, but confusing because in a steel cage match, like, you win by pinfall or submission like normal, but you also win by escaping the cage. And so you usually have these really interesting constructed spots where, like, one of the wrestlers is trying to, like, climb the cage, and it's almost like a ladder match where you know, in a ladder match you win when you get to the top of the ladder and you pull down the belt or whatever. And in the steel cage, you try to climb the side of the cage, and then the other guy tries to get up and pull you back in. And that's usually what a lot of the spots are constructed around. But for some reason, WWF, like, they have a door on the side of the cage, and the referee will just open it for you. So, like, you do your finishing move, and then you just start trying to walk out of the cage, and the other guy has to, like, get up and just, like, pull your ankle or something to stop you from walking out of the cage, and it just kills all the momentum of the match. Plus, this is a tag team match, so it wasn't really clear what is meant by escaping the cage. Like, does one person have to escape? Do both people have to escape?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, like, if one person escaped, wouldn't it ironically disqualify that team? Because there's no possible way you could tag the other guy in unless you run around to the other side.
Well, it's what they call a tornado match, where everybody's in the ring at the same time, because you can't really stand outside in a tag match surrounded by a cage. So it's just everybody in the ring, and two guys have to climb out. So, like, the problem is, you know, you're trying to climb out now. So Jeff Hardy escapes the ring, and now Matt is in the center of the ring with the two guys he's fighting, and they're just beating the crap out of him because it's 2-on-1 now. And Jeff is, like, bouncing around the outside like an idiot because he doesn't know what to do. Like, does he get back into the ring? Like, does he go to try to save his brother? And it turns out that's what he tries to do. And then Matt gets out while Jeff is still in. But now Jeff, I guess, it reset his escape status because he got back into the cage. So I guess they both had to get out at the same time. But how do you even do that?
Yeah.
And then the other guys, they just walked out the door. So so it makes the faces look like idiots that they didn't just do a finishing move and walk out the door or do everything in their power to get out the door. Like, I guess they're trying to make it feel like the heels are taking the easy way out and the faces are going for the hard way, which makes them more respectable. But, like, it's substantially overthinking the booking of the match, and it made it play out badly. Like, I didn't even expect to talk about this pay-per-view on the podcast because it was so bad. but since I'm here on short notice, I guess I can rant a little bit for the last 15 minutes of Recon. Let's see what else. I guess there was a women's match. So arguably one of the most famous segments in WWF history was a replay of the old like television show This Is Your Life, featuring The Rock and Mankind. It got like a 8 or a 9.0 rating when it aired the first time. It's like one of the highest rated television segments in wrestling history. And so last week they tried to recreate that for the women's title, where the current champion, her name's Alexa Bliss, and she's like a mean girl type. And the challenger, Bayley, she's very wholesome, like John Cena. That's how she's presented. She's like a superhero. She's a super fan. She grew up being a fan of wrestling, and now she wants to be the women's champion. And she's previously been the champion, so she's earned that role. Now she wants to get it back from Alexa Bliss. So that's the storyline around the title fight. So they tried to recreate the This Is Your Life segment, where Alexa tries to make Bayley look like an idiot for being and like a nerd and a dork for watching wrestling and growing up and wanting to be a wrestler. And it's like, you're telling the face this in the middle of the ring and constructing like a 20-minute television segment about this. How do you think this makes the viewers feel to tell, Bayley that she's an idiot for watching Raw? Like I feel like an idiot for watching Raw now because you're telling me that I'm an idiot for watching Raw on the show. So like there's a high chance that, I don't know, I know you watch a little bit of Wrestle Crap, which I think is a Channel Awesome production, or like made by one of the same guys. That segment has a high probability of winding up in like Wrestle Crap style halls of fame. It just goes to show you how far they seem to have gone to sabotage the build for Extreme Rules, which should be like a fun, like lightweight, exciting pay-per-view, and they just like really fucked it up. So I guess we can close the book on that and just look forward to Money in the Bank. I forget exactly what week that is, but it should be like 2 to 3 weeks from now. So
nice.
I'll be happy to. And so one note is that will be the first pay-per-view to have a women's Money in the Bank ladder match. So consistent with their attempt to rebuild the women's division in WWF, they will for the first time have a Mrs. Money in the Bank, or Miss Money in the Bank, in addition to a Mr. Money in the Bank. Huh. And that is very exciting. So I'll be happy to talk about that after that pay-per-view is over. And that's the end of my rant.
Alrighty then.
So for those of you who are still listening and haven't tuned out, to go watch other Lotus Prince videos.
Yeah. Well, that is the show for this week. So please remember to subscribe to the Corrective Consciousness YouTube and Soundcloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement keeps the show going. You can also catch us on Tuesday for our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness, the podcast about our lives in pop culture. There's no point whatsoever in looking up the absent guy's Vice the Bold name on PSN, Xbox, wherever you can find him, Xbox Live, Twitter, Steam. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince, all one word. And if you want to catch some of my videos early and get in on exclusive streams, then maybe consult my Patreon. It's patreon.com/LotusPrince. Again, all one word.
And you can find me wherever you can find PyroJackFrost and Cladoid 540 products.
And you can find me as OldManStompy inside a steel cage fighting Vice the Bold for whoever gets to be on the next episode of the podcast.
Whoever condescends better. All right, well, thank you very much for listening. And until next time, everyone.
Good night.
Cheers.